Nothing exposes human optimism like ignoring instructions and hoping physics takes the day off. What follows isn't problem solving, it's performance art. And somehow, this is just the warm-up. 1. A man bought a flat-pack desk and decided the instructions were an insult to his natural engineering genius. So he tossed them aside with the confidence of someone who once saw a YouTube thumbnail about carpentry. He assembled the entire thing using equal parts stubbornness, gravity, and whatever screws happened to be within reach, resulting in a structure that resembled a modern art installation titled "Collapse Imminent." When the desk inevitably folded like a tired lawn chair, he became outraged, not at himself, of course, but at the manufacturer for design flaws, as if the designers had failed to anticipate the unique chaos of a person building furniture exclusively by vibe. He marched around complaining that the wood must be cheap, the design must be faulty, and the universe must be conspiring against him. Meanwhile, the unused instructions, perfectly clear and patiently diagrammed, sat nearby like a tutor watching a student proudly fail the easiest test in history. 2. A woman tried assembling a blender without reading the manual because, in her mind, anything with a single button should be idiot-proof, even though reality has attempted to correct that assumption many times. She stacked the components in an order that resembled a Jenga tower built during an earthquake, slapped the lid on sideways, and confidently dumped in frozen fruit like she was performing dietary alchemy. When she pressed the power button, the blender responded by launching the ingredients upward with the enthusiasm of a confetti cannon at a budget New Year's party, coating her walls in a sticky waterfall of strawberry despair. Instead of admitting she might have missed a step, such as all of them, she declared the blender defective and dangerously unpredictable, which is a poetic way to describe the relationship between human arrogance and electrical appliances. Meanwhile, the instructions clearly warned about proper assembly, but apparently they were too polite to scream. 3. One employee decided to clean the office coffee maker by pouring dish soap directly into the water reservoir, bypassing both instructions and basic chemistry, like a man bravely refusing to acknowledge that bubbles expand. He ran the machine as usual, and within moments the break room transformed into a slow-moving foam tsunami that crawled across the floor with the determination of a low-budget sci-fi monster. Instead of turning off the machine, he attempted to contain the growing suds by patting them back down with his hands, which is roughly as effective as stopping a flood by yelling at it. By the time help arrived, the foam had engulfed everything within a 3-desk radius, including a stack of invoices and at least one coworker's emotional stability. The instructions, which stated, "Do not use soap inside machine," were printed in bold letters large enough to qualify as a billboard. But apparently this man preferred to learn through immersive disaster. 4. A guy attempted to replace his car's headlight without looking at the manual, relying purely on car instincts, a mysterious internal force that tends to activate only when someone is about to void a warranty. He yanked on random components like he was trying to win a prize from a mechanical claw machine, eventually dislodging a completely unrelated part that had nothing to do with illumination, but everything to do with making the engine stop working. Convinced his car was rejecting the new bulb, he tried forcing pieces back together in whatever orientation gravity suggested, which resulted in a dashboard light display resembling a casino slot machine in emotional distress. When a mechanic finally opened the hood, he paused for several seconds in silent contemplation, the universal mechanic expression for, "I must charge extra for whatever this is." The manual's diagram, showing exactly how to change the bulb, remained unread in the glove compartment, quietly judging. 5. A person tried installing a ceiling fan without reading the instructions, which is already impressive because the instructions contain approximately 30 warnings announcing that death is a possible outcome. They confidently wired the wrong wires together because color coordination is just a suggestion, and mounted the fan with screws better suited for hanging a lightweight Christmas ornament. The moment they flipped the switch, the fan came alive like an angry mechanical seagull trying to escape captivity, wobbling violently before launching a blade across the room with the enthusiasm of an Olympic discus thrower. They described the incident as unexpected, which is a charmingly optimistic way to frame a scenario that could have earned them a commemorative plaque in the Darwin Awards lobby. The instruction manual, meanwhile, politely offered step-by-step directions for not summoning a helicopter accident inside one's own living room. 6. A woman attempted to assemble a bicycle for her kid without consulting the instructions because she assumed bikes were basically just circles and sticks, which is not technically wrong but also not remotely helpful. She attached the handlebars backward, installed the training wheels at an experimental angle better suited for interpretive dance, and put the seat on so loosely it behaved like a carnival ride designed by someone with personal grudges. When the child attempted to ride it, the entire structure rotated in ways no bicycle has ever rotated in the history of human transportation, giving the kid the brief but unforgettable experience of riding a vehicle possessed by artistic ambition. The mother blamed the manufacturer for inconsistent parts, which is a curious interpretation of consistency. The instructions consistently explained everything, but she had consistently not read them. 7. A person decided to install a smart thermostat without reading the directions, confidently declaring, "How hard can temperature be?" a sentence that usually precedes a power outage. They began rewiring the unit with the confidence of someone who thinks electricity is just spicy air, mixing up every wire possible until the thermostat displayed a temperature reading that suggested the home was somewhere between the surface of the sun and Tartarus. When the HVAC system shut down in self-defense, they insisted the device was overheating with attitude and left a one-star review complaining that the thermostat refused to cooperate with basic commands. The instructions, which included multiple pages explaining exactly which wire goes where, might as well have been printed in invisible ink for all the attention they received. 8. A guy bought a drone and skipped the instructions because he felt that anyone who'd played video games must, by law, understand aviation. Upon takeoff, he immediately steered it into a tree, then confidently blamed unexpected wind, even though the air was so still it could have been used to calibrate scientific instruments. He retrieved the drone, ignored the reset guide, and launched it again, this time sending it elaborately spiraling into a neighbor's backyard where it introduced itself to a garden gnome with catastrophic enthusiasm. He then insisted drones are unpredictable by nature, which is roughly true only when the pilot is operating entirely on confidence fumes. The manual clearly stated, "Practice in an open space," but apparently the definition of open space now includes obstacles, fences, and unamused neighbors. 9. A woman attempted to use a pressure cooker without reading the instructions, because why would a device explicitly described as high pressure require her attention? She sealed the lid incorrectly, cranked the heat to maximum like she was launching a spacecraft, and wandered off to "let it do its thing," a phrase that should be banned from use near anything capable of explosion. The cooker responded by releasing steam in a manner usually reserved for locomotives about to express deep emotional dissatisfaction, eventually blasting the lid upward and decorating the ceiling with a rice constellation. She later claimed the cooker was unstable, which is one way to phrase was used incorrectly in every possible dimension. The instructions she didn't read included a section titled, "How to Prevent Sudden Dramatic Ceiling Renovations." 10. A man decided to assemble a grill without reading the instructions because he believed grilling is a primal activity requiring instinct, not literacy. He constructed the frame inside out, mounted the lid where the base should be, and somehow installed the igniter upside down, as if attempting to reinvent fire through interpretive hardware expression. When he tried lighting it, the burners refused to cooperate, and the entire structure began folding like it was trying to take a nap. Upset, he declared the grill structurally weak, as if the metal itself had failed him personally. Several neighbors gathered to watch what appeared to be a performance art piece titled "Why Warranties Exist." The manual, which clearly labeled every step, remained unopened on the grass like the world's most patient bystander. 11. Someone attempted to program a universal remote without glancing at the instructions, insisting the device should just figure it out like some kind of telepathic butler. They mashed buttons at random with the intensity of someone trying to safely defuse a bomb using only vibes, eventually causing the TV to switch inputs, the speakers to blast static, and the Blu-ray player to open and close repeatedly like it was trying to breathe through a paper bag. They scolded the remote for being difficult, as though the remote had personally chosen to wage psychological war. The instructions, which provided clear setup codes and a step-by-step process, sat in the box untouched, probably wondering why humans are allowed to own technology at all. 12. A man tried installing his own dishwasher without reading the instructions because he once successfully tightened a loose cabinet hinge and believed that qualified him for plumbing. He connected the hoses backward, creating a water loop that bypassed the dishwasher entirely, and instead turned his kitchen floor into a commemorative fountain. He then ran the machine anyway, insisting that it'll sort itself out, which is a fascinating take on hydraulics. When water began pouring from the front panel, like the dishwasher had entered a state of emotional collapse, he called it manufacturer sabotage. The manual, which included diagrams, warnings, and bold text saying "do not reverse hoses," sat nearby in pristine condition. 13. A woman attempted to assemble a treadmill without reading the instructions, because what is a treadmill if not a moving plank with ambitions? She installed the belt backward, assembled the handrails onto the wrong side, and attached the safety clip to a part of the machine not designed to move, creating a setup that appeared legally unsafe even before she plugged it in. When she did turn it on, the treadmill responded by flinging the belt forward and launching a water bottle into the wall with the precision of a disgruntled trebuchet. She insisted treadmills are finicky, which is a kind way of describing a machine exposed to construction choices normally found in abstract sculpture. The instructions, meanwhile, outlined the assembly in 9 simple steps, none of which she encountered because she never opened the booklet. 14. One employee attempted to refill the office label maker without reading the instructions, confidently assuming it functioned. Like a fax machine he once glimpsed from a distance, instead of loading the cartridge properly, he shoved it into the machine upside down and backward, which caused the label tape to spool out wildly like the world's least helpful party streamer. He then tried solving the problem by tugging on the tape, because nothing says precision like brute force, and succeeded only in jamming the entire mechanism. The machine began printing labels that consisted entirely of random punctuation, which at least matched the emotional state of anyone watching. The instructions clearly illustrated how to load the cartridge with a single arrow, but apparently arrows are only persuasive when found on road signs. 15. A man tried to set up a backyard inflatable pool without reading the instructions, insisting that inflatable things inflate, which is true in the same way that cars move is true. Details matter. He placed the pool on uneven ground, ignored the leveling guide, and inflated it to maximum capacity until the seams groaned with the tension of a sitcom marriage. As soon as he filled it with water, the entire structure listed to one side like a ship awaiting rescue, then burst, sending a wave across the yard that briefly transformed the lawn into a reenactment of the Great Flood. He claimed the material was defective, even though the instructions specifically warned not to inflate on uneven surfaces. Hydrohubris is a powerful force. 16. A woman attempted to color her hair using a boxed dye kit without reading the instructions, treating the chemical process with the casual attitude one might reserve for spreading butter on toast. She mixed the wrong components together, left the concoction in twice as long as recommended, and applied it unevenly in what can only be described as a freestyle impressionist technique. The final result was a patchwork of tones ranging from burnt pumpkin to existential crisis copper. She blamed the dye for being unpredictable, as though the pigments had staged a coup. The instruction sheet, which clearly explained ratios, timing, and application technique, remained untouched, possibly because it had too many words and not enough pictures. 17. A person bought a 3D printer and ignored the instructions because they believed creativity should not be restrained by manuals or reality. They skipped calibration, bypassed bed leveling, and loaded filament with all the grace of someone trying to thread a needle in a moving vehicle. The printer responded by producing objects that looked less like prototypes and more like modern art interpretations of melting existential dread. Spaghetti-like strands of plastic piled up in a corner, forming a sculpture that could be titled Ambition versus Physics. The owner complained that the printer was acting random, which is technically accurate if random means performing exactly as expected given zero setup. The manual, which spent multiple pages insisting calibration was mandatory, was dismissed as optional reading, a phrase that haunts engineers everywhere. 18. A man tried assembling a tent without reading the instructions, apparently believing that if prehistoric hunters could construct shelters, then surely he, a modern adult with access to YouTube thumbnails and Wi-Fi, could manage nylon and poles. He spread the pieces across the campsite like he was performing an autopsy on outdoor recreation itself, then confidently jammed several poles into the ground at angles unknown to geometry, creating a structure that looked less like a tent and more like a failed art school installation doomed to be described using words like experimental and unintended. When the fabric wouldn't cooperate, he declared it shrinking, which is a bold accusation to make against inanimate polyester. Hours later, with night approaching, the result resembled a partially collapsed spider struggling to finish its web during an existential crisis. As he complained the tent was misleading, the untouched instructions sat silently in the bag, an introverted genius observing the downfall of human overconfidence. 19. A woman attempted to set up a home projector but refused to read the instructions because she assumed projecting movies onto a wall was basically the same as turning on a lamp, just with plot. She pointed the device at the wall, the ceiling, the dog, and at one point her own shirt, trying to achieve the right angle through a technique that could best be described as panicking in a circle. When the image appeared upside down, she insisted the movie studio must have released a faulty copy, as though Hollywood secretly encoded films for bats. Then she spent 20 minutes adjusting every setting except the one that actually mattered, producing experimental visuals that looked like a sci-fi film composed entirely of abstract shadows. The instructions, which included a cartoon image demonstrating correct placement, remained trapped in the box, wondering why they even bothered trying to help a species so allergic to guidance. 20. A guy bought a home beer brewing kit and proudly discarded the instructions because he believed flavor should come from intuition, not scientific process, which is a refreshing philosophy unless one intends to ferment liquids meant for human consumption. He mixed ingredients in the wrong order, skipped sanitation as though bacteria were something that happened to other people, and sealed the fermenter with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for burying secrets. As pressure built, the container swelled ominously like it was preparing to reenact a documentary about industrial accidents, eventually bursting and turning his kitchen into a crime scene decorated entirely in sticky foam and poorly realized ambition. When asked what happened, he explained the yeast had an attitude problem, as though microorganisms were staging a union strike. The instructions, written by professionals who try very hard to keep explosions out of the hobbyist experience, sat untouched, doomed to watch another human discover fermentation through collateral damage. 21. One employee attempted to set up a company Wi-Fi extender without reading the instructions because he believed Wi-Fi networks operate on the power of positive thinking and just connecting things. He plugged the device into a random outlet, entered several passwords with the creativity of someone generating ransom notes, and declared the entire office should feel the boost soon, as though signal strength spreads through inspirational speeches. Instead, he accidentally created a network loop that caused the office internet to crash repeatedly, resulting in a day of digital whiplash in which every web page loaded halfway, froze, then reloaded backward in what felt like an avant-garde commentary on productivity. He blamed the extender for not understanding the assignment, which is poetic but unfair since assignments typically come with instructions, something he intentionally ignored. Meanwhile, the manual offered extremely clear setup steps, but apparently did not radiate enough spiritual energy to earn his attention. 22. A woman tried repairing her own glasses without reading the instructions included in the tiny repair kit, assuming the process was simple. Find the screw, tighten the screw, become a functional adult. Instead, she grabbed the wrong screw, twisted it into a hinge that had never requested a roommate, and tightened it until the frame bent into a shape that could only be described as optical jazz. She kept adjusting it until the lenses sat at mismatched heights, giving the glasses the same expression as a confused raccoon caught reading your mail. When she finally put them on, one lens faced forward and the other angled toward the ceiling, giving her a clear view of absolutely nothing helpful. She blamed the glasses for being poorly designed, as though the hinge had spontaneously mutated. The instructions, complete with diagrams the size of postage stamps, remained sealed, quietly reminding the universe that tiny tools require tiny amounts of humility. 23. One man attempted to assemble a bookshelf but refused to read the instructions because he felt that if he could read novels, he could undoubtedly build the things that hold them. He placed shelves upside down, hammered nails into locations where nails have no natural habitat, and installed the backing board on the front like he was designing a secret fort for introverted books. When he stood the bookshelf upright, it swayed dramatically, as if performing a curtain call for a play about structural instability. Unsurprisingly, it collapsed under the weight of the first book he placed on it, a paperback no less, prompting him to declare the build untrustworthy. He then blamed gravity, wood density, and mass-market furniture brands, graciously excluding himself from the list of suspects. The manual included a bold note stating, "Do not assemble alone if unfamiliar with the design," which is ironic because he wasn't just unfamiliar. He'd declared unfamiliarity a lifestyle choice. 24. A person attempted to program a robotic vacuum without the instructions because they believed robots should come preloaded with the ability to read minds and floor plans. They turned it on and watched proudly as the vacuum immediately lodged itself under a couch, spun helplessly, and emitted a beeping pattern that sounded suspiciously like a cry for help. Rather than adjusting the settings, the owner assumed the robot was asserting independence and let it continue its existential journey across the floor, where it repeatedly bumped into the same chair leg like a tiny, persistent philosopher contemplating the meaning of obstacles. When it later dragged a sock halfway across the home before choking on it dramatically, they declared the vacuum too sensitive, which is an interesting accusation to make against a machine whose entire purpose is to endure suffering. The instructions explaining mapping mode sat ignored, still trying to offer wisdom to someone who preferred chaos to clarity. 25. A woman attempted to assemble a cat tree without reading the instructions, which is particularly bold considering the average cat approaches furniture with the same scrutiny TSA applies to suspicious luggage. She stacked platforms randomly, tightened screws wherever her heart felt moved, and created a structure so precarious it swayed from emotional instability alone. When she presented the finished tower to her cat, it took one look, tapped the base gingerly with its paw, and backed away slowly like a detective leaving a live bomb. Moments later, the cat tree collapsed under its own existential dread, turning into a fuzzy avalanche of carpeted parts. She labeled the experience a manufacturer failure, which is certainly one interpretation of a situation that did not involve reading any instructions, measuring any pieces, or acknowledging the laws of physics. Somewhere in the box, the assembly guide quietly mourned the collapse of trust between humans and their pets. 26. A guy attempted to repair his clogged garbage disposal without reading any instructions, as though sticking one's hand near spinning metal blades is simply a matter of good vibes and determination. Instead of unplugging the unit, he reached inside blindly while flipping the switch to test if it was jammed, which is a method typically reserved for fictional characters who do not require hands in future scenes. Miraculously avoiding injury, he managed only to wedge the clog deeper, causing the disposal to grind menacingly like it was contemplating rebellion. When smoke began wafting upward, he declared the machine dramatic, ignoring the fact that appliances tend to emit smoke only under duress. The instructions, which stated in the most straightforward language imaginable, disconnect power before servicing, might as well have been written in ancient runes for all the attention he gave them. 27. One person tried installing a wall-mounted TV bracket without reading the instructions because they believed that eyeballing measurements was basically the same as using tools. They drilled holes wherever intuition whispered, mounted the bracket crookedly, and hung the TV at an angle more suitable for watching content in the middle of a landslide. Moments after stepping back to admire the result, a masterpiece of asymmetry, the entire setup tore from the wall and crashed downward, taking a section of drywall with it like a farewell gift. They blamed the cheap walls, as though the house spontaneously downgraded its materials out of spite. The instructions, which recommended locating studs and using proper anchors, remained tucked away, quietly regretting their inability to prevent predictable chaos. 28. A man attempted to assemble a baby crib without reading the instructions, convinced that caring for a tiny human required instinct, not structural diagrams. He installed the side rails backward, attached the mattress support upside down, and created a sleeping area best described as a playpen designed by someone who had only ever heard rumors about children. When he placed the mattress inside, it hovered at a diagonal that suggested the crib was preparing to launch the baby into orbit. Noticing the issue, he added extra screws for stability, which achieved absolutely nothing except increasing the likelihood that the crib would someday be discovered in an archaeological dig labeled anxiety in wood form. The instructions emphasized safety standards in bold text, but he bypassed them with the confidence of a man who believes gravity is merely a suggestion. 29. A woman bought a decorative fountain kit and proudly ignored the instructions because water flows downhill, and thus the rest should sort itself out. She assembled the basin backward, placed the pump on top instead of inside, and arranged the stones with a kind of creative optimism that suggested she was hoping physics would applaud her artistic choices. Upon activation, the pump sprayed water outward like a startled octopus, drenching her patio furniture and briefly achieving the rare feat of making indoor-outdoor decor look actively ashamed. She insisted the fountain was overly temperamental, even though she had essentially created a hydro-powered sprinkler masquerading as home decor. The instructions, which neatly explained pump placement and water levels, were left in their plastic bag, probably glad to have avoided participation in this aquatic misunderstanding. 30. A man attempted to fix a jammed printer without reading the instructions, which is the technological equivalent of wandering into a cave without a flashlight. Because how complicated can rocks be? He opened every compartment that wasn't stuck, shook the machine as though it owed him money, and tugged on the jammed paper from the wrong direction, tearing it into a confetti-like memorial to productivity. The printer immediately responded by flashing every warning light available, forming a message that could reasonably be translated as, "Why have you forsaken me?" He insisted printers were designed to fail, which is a convenient theory for someone who just performed an interpretive surgery on office equipment. The instructions politely recommended turning the printer off before removing jams, but politeness rarely survives contact with impatience. 31. A person attempted to install a dimmer switch without reading the instructions, assuming lighting is simply the negotiation between a bulb and human preference. They connected incompatible wires until Sparks politely suggested they reconsider their life choices, then continued fiddling until the switch produced an effect best described as mood lighting for ghosts, flickering unpredictably like a seance invitation. When the lights finally went out entirely, they accused the switch of not committing to a brightness level, as though the device were emotionally indecisive rather than electrically distressed. The instructions, which clearly explained compatibility requirements and grounding, waited patiently in the packaging, wondering how humanity managed to make it this far on the timeline. 32. Someone decided to replace a toilet flapper without reading the instructions because plumbing, in their mind, is simply wet Lego. They installed the flapper backward, reattached the chain at a length that could only be described as aspirational, and flushed proudly, expecting immediate success. Instead, the tank refused to refill properly, producing a gurgling noise that suggested the toilet was reevaluating its commitment to civilization. Water continued running endlessly, like a tiny indoor waterfall designed by someone who hates utility bills. They declared the toilet attention-seeking, which is an interesting diagnosis for a fixture simply begging not to drown. The instructions detailed chain length, placement, and orientation, but simple information apparently lost the battle to pure improvisation. 33. A guy attempted to assemble a trampoline without reading the instructions, trusting both his optimism and the deeply misguided belief that springs stretching across a metal frame will naturally organize themselves. He attached springs unevenly, installed the mat upside down, and stretched the safety net with the tense ambivalence of someone wrapping an oddly shaped birthday present. The final result sagged like a trampoline contemplating retirement, and during the first test bounce, performed by someone else, thankfully, the entire structure shifted sideways, relocating itself 3 feet across the yard as though fleeing from responsibility. He blamed the wind, despite the air being as motionless as a disappointed parent. The instructions explained everything with cheerful clarity, but he'd tossed them aside like a spoiler for a movie he didn't want ruined by accuracy. 34. A woman tried assembling her new standing desk without reading the instructions because she believed modern furniture should be intuitive, a concept manufacturers usually interpret as, "Please don't sue us." She installed the motorized legs on opposite sides, attached the control panel upside down, and wired everything in a way that made the desk rise and lower diagonally, as though performing a mechanical curtsy. When she attempted to use it, the desk lifted one corner dramatically, tossing her belongings across the room like a stage magician revealing the world's saddest trick. She declared the desk possessed, which is a reasonable conclusion if one excludes the possibility of human error entirely. The instruction booklet, which featured color-coded parts and helpful diagrams, remained untouched, quietly accepting its role as the least influential object in her office. 35. A man decided to install his own garage door opener without reading the instructions because, in his mind, anything that moves vertically is basically a fancy window. He mounted the motor at an angle that suggested he'd been inspired by modern sculpture, attached the chain drive so loosely it drooped like a depressed necklace, and proudly hit the remote. The garage door responded by rising halfway, reconsidering its life choices, and slamming shut with the comedic timing of a sitcom punchline. Rather than suspect his setup, he accused the door of having mood swings, as though building materials were capable of emotional sabotage. He then tried helping the motor by lifting the door manually, which confused the system so thoroughly it began blinking errors like Morse code for "Please stop touching me." Meanwhile, the manual, written by engineers who clearly anticipated this exact demographic, remained unopened, heroically absorbing dust instead of blame. 36. A woman attempted to assemble her robotic lawn mower without reading the instructions, relying entirely on the belief that robots, like cats, will eventually figure out their purpose if left alone. She placed the boundary wire in a shape that resembled a geography quiz drawn by a sleep-deprived middle schooler, then hit the power button and waited proudly. The mower woke up, scanned the lawn, and immediately took off in a straight line, right past the boundary, across the driveway, and into the neighbor's yard, where it began aggressively trimming a rose bush that had never wronged it. When she finally retrieved the machine, she claimed it had wanderlust, as if her yard care appliance were channeling the spirit of a backpacking gap-year student. The instructions politely explained how to set boundaries, but as we've learned, some humans prefer spiritual chaos to helpful diagrams. 37. A guy tried installing a bidet attachment without reading the instructions because, according to him, water pressure is mostly vibes. He connected the hoses backward, tightened the valve with what can only be described as unearned confidence, and proudly activated the system. In response, the bidet unleashed a pressurized fountain that shot directly upward, ricocheted off the lid, and created an indoor geyser impressive enough that Yellowstone would have taken notes. He flailed at the controls, screamed at the water like it was misbehaving on purpose, and eventually shut it off only after soaking the bathroom, the hallway, and most of his ego. He told friends the bidet attacked him, which is half true only if we classify ignorance as an accomplice. The instructions contained bold warnings about pressure and direction, but he treated them like optional reading for people who fear consequences. 38. Someone attempted to set up a home alarm system without reading the instructions, assuming security technology works like a loyal dog. You plug it in, it knows who to bark at. They installed sensors upside down, placed the motion detector behind a potted plant like it was hiding from creditors, and connected the siren directly next to the bedroom door for maximum future regret. When they armed the system, it immediately triggered itself in a loop, screaming into the night with the enthusiasm of a toddler discovering volume for the first time. They called customer service to report that the alarm was overreacting, as though home security hardware is prone to emotional outbursts. The instructions warned repeatedly about placement and calibration, but perhaps repeatedly should have been replaced with, "This will absolutely ruin your evening if ignored," which is the only language some people understand. 39. A woman tried to assemble a rowing machine without reading the instructions because she believed fitness equipment naturally gravitates toward functionality, like a self-assembling transformer. She installed the resistance mechanism backward, accidentally set the tension to vengeful, and placed the seat on the track so loosely it rattled like haunted cookware. When she attempted a test pull, the handle snapped forward unexpectedly, causing her to slide backward off the seat in a graceful arc that would have impressed Olympic divers. She sat on the floor, confused why the machine behaved like a medieval torture device, and muttered that it lacked cooperation. The instructions detailed a simple, logical sequence for assembly, but logic had long since left the building, much like her enthusiasm for home workouts. 40. A man tried updating his smart home lighting system without reading the instructions, assuming software updates operate on the same principles as sprinkling digital fairy dust. He reset the system incorrectly, causing every light in the house to flash on and off. In synchronized chaos like a discount EDM festival no one agreed to host. In his panic, he yelled commands at his voice assistant, which, given the level of confusion, responded by dimming some lights, brightening others, and turning the kitchen pink for reasons known only to the algorithm. Neighbors reportedly thought he was filming a low-budget music video. He later blamed the bulbs for being rebellious, apparently unaware that rebellion is a side effect of user error, not electricity. The instructions, which could have prevented this rave, sat unread, proving that smart homes only amplify the decisions of extremely unsmart humans. 41. One employee tried to replace the office paper towel dispenser by winging it, because reading instructions at work apparently violates some internal code of conduct. He installed the roll so tightly the towels fused into a single paper cylinder, then mounted the dispenser backward, forcing coworkers to reach behind it like raccoons foraging behind a dumpster. When the entire unit fell off the wall during lunchtime, landing with the thud of a bored deity smiting bad decisions, he claimed the screws were philosophically incompatible with the wall. He then remounted it using tape, which lasted exactly 1 hour before cascading onto the floor again. The instructions, which featured all caps warnings and friendly illustrations, might as well have been printed in Sanskrit for all the attention they received. 42. A woman attempted to assemble her porch swing without reading the instructions, believing gravity would figure it out. She used the wrong chains, attached them at uneven lengths, and created a seating arrangement that tilted so aggressively it could have doubled as a carnival ride designed by nihilists. When she tested it, the swing immediately lurched sideways, tossing her gently but decisively into a nearby shrub with the grace of a Victorian heroine fainting for dramatic effect. She blamed the swing for being unbalanced, a remarkable accusation considering the swing wasn't the one treating installation like jazz improvisation. The instructions explicitly warned about chain length and weight distribution, but she preferred to trust her instincts. Instincts which, unfortunately, have a spotty record with physics. 43. A man tried setting up a portable generator without reading the manual because he assumed electricity in, electricity out was the entire trade. Instead of placing it outdoors, he parked it proudly inside the garage with the door closed, like he was tucking it in for a nap. Minutes later, the generator filled the garage with fumes, tripped its own safety shutoff, and nearly caused a carbon monoxide incident detailed in future safety seminars. When a neighbor intervened, he insisted the generator was overly sensitive, ignoring the fact that he had essentially created a gas chamber for machinery. The manual, a thick, heartfelt plea for common sense, never stood a chance in the presence of such determined misunderstanding. 44. Someone tried assembling a DIY greenhouse without reading the instructions, approaching the project with the same chaotic optimism earlier seen in tent construction and trampoline engineering. They connected the metal poles into a frame that sagged like a wilted flower, stretched the plastic cover so loosely it fluttered in the breeze like a budget ghost costume, and zip-tied the door backward so it peeled open like an indecisive curtain. When the first gust of wind arrived, the entire structure took flight across the yard, rolling majestically until it wrapped itself around a tree like nature's saddest burrito. They declared the greenhouse not wind-resistant, ignoring the repeated warnings in the manual about anchoring, orientation, and basic earth science. 45. A woman tried assembling a standing lamp without reading the instructions, believing lamps are simple creatures with no hidden ambitions. She stacked the poles in the wrong order, creating a lamp that leaned at a dramatic angle like it had suddenly become aware of existential dread. The shade was attached upside down, giving the lamp the overall aesthetic of a confused flamingo attempting yoga. When the bulb flickered due to her incorrect wiring, she announced the lamp was haunted, which is an interesting conclusion, but not one supported by wiring diagrams. The instructions provided clear, friendly steps, but she was apparently too spiritually advanced for such mundane assistance. 46. A man attempted to assemble a treadmill desk without reading the instructions, as if combining two complex ideas, walking and working, should naturally cancel out the need for guidance. He attached the desktop backward, mounted the controls underneath where no human hand could reach, and installed the treadmill belt so misaligned it drifted left like it was trying to merge into traffic. When he attempted to walk and type, the belt pushed him sideways until he clung to the wall like a startled cat. He claimed the desk didn't support multitasking, when in fact it simply didn't support user negligence. The instructions, which promised a seamless setup experience, must have felt personally betrayed. 47. One employee tried to replace the office water cooler jug without reading the instructions, reasoning that it's just upside-down water. He slammed the jug onto the dispenser with such enthusiasm that the cap shattered, causing water to erupt downward like a budget volcano, flooding the break room with the drama of a very hydrated disaster movie. Instead of turning off the flow, he attempted to hold it back with his hands, an iconic technique featured in absolutely no instruction manual ever printed. When the chaos finally subsided, he muttered something about faulty design, prompting several coworkers to gaze at the ceiling in prayerful disbelief. The manual, taped to the dispenser in 3 languages, politely recommended a gentler approach. 48. A woman tried assembling a portable AC unit without reading the instructions because cold air is cold air. She installed the exhaust hose facing inward, effectively transforming the AC into a heat cannon that blasted warm air back into her living room with the conviction of a broken dragon. After an hour of confused sweating, she declared the AC counterproductive, which, to be fair, was exactly how it had been installed. Only when a friend pointed out that machines require correct airflow did she reluctantly consult the instructions, which explained Jose direction with pictures a toddler could interpret. 49. A man attempted to replace his microwave door without reading the instructions, convinced that doors, regardless of appliance, all follow the same rules. He removed every screw in sight, including ones that should never be touched by mortal hands, causing the entire outer shell of the microwave to collapse like a dying star. He then tried reassembling it by intuition, producing a shape not unlike a metal origami project abandoned halfway through. When the microwave refused to power on, possibly out of shame, he declared modern appliances fragile. The manual, which would have told him not to touch 90% of the screws he enthusiastically removed, remained sealed in its envelope, thanking the universe for small mercies. 50. Someone attempted to assemble a backyard fire pit without reading the instructions, which is always bold considering fire is famously unfriendly to improvisation. They placed the stones in a loose circle, stacked them unevenly, and built the pit on top of a wooden deck. An artistic choice known in some cultures as insurance fraud in progress. When the first flame appeared, the stones shifted, the heat warped the boards, and the entire setup threatened to burn a perfect circular hole straight into the homeowner's dignity. They claimed the fire pit ran hot, as though that revelation would shock any scientist who has studied combustion. The instructions, which contained a page titled "Do not use on wood," must have sighed audibly. 51. And finally, though not because intelligence suddenly prevailed, a man tried assembling his brand new home sauna without reading the instructions, insisting that heat boxes are self-explanatory. He wired the heating panels incorrectly, installed the temperature sensor on the outside of the sauna so it wouldn't get too hot, and sealed the door backward, trapping heat with the enthusiasm of a blast furnace. When he turned it on, the sauna rapidly transformed into a shimmering tribute to human overconfidence, heating itself far beyond safe levels until the wood began creaking like it was rethinking its contract with existence. He opened the door, gasped at the wave of scorching air, and announced the sauna was too effective, which is certainly one way to describe the closest legal thing to walking into the sun. The instructions, which begin with the bold phrase "This product can cause serious harm if installed incorrectly," remained in the box, untouched, unread, and undeniably justified. Chaos this dumb deserves a trophy, but I'll settle for comments. Pick the worst offender or share your own disasters. Like, subscribe and let the madness continue.